It's been about 6 months now that students of federal tertiary institutions in the country have been at home, not out of their choice, and this is due to the strike embarked upon by members of the Academic Staff Union of Universities. This overfilled agreements between it and the federal government. So far, all avenues explored to resolve the lingering crisis have failed, and there yet seems no end in sight. The Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities now says the government's insistence that it has no money to fund Nigerian universities is disheartening. The Vice Chancellors were reacting to a statement credited to the Minister of State for Labor and Employment, Festus Keyamo, where he said the government had no money to meet ASUU's demands and wouldn't go into borrowing. Well, the issues and demands of ASUU, according to the group of Vice Chancellors, weren't for the union, but for the rehabilitation of the universities, as well as funding the universities for improved education delivery, which should be government's priority. Joining us now via Zoom is the President, National Association of Nigerian Students, Sunday Ashifon, and the Secretary General of the Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities, Professor Yakubu Aboki Ochefu. We thank you both very much for joining us at this time. I begin with you, Prof. A little more on the earlier stance we brought up in the intro to this interview, where your body has said, of course, bemoaned the fact that the government says it has no money. And by the way, the 2 weeks given by the president have also since expired. What's your take on that?
Thank you very much for having me on this program. The response of inability to fund education the way it should be funded in general, and the particular issue with this strike, and the reason why the university system is in disbelief when government says they don't have money, as Festus Keyamo has put it, is because when you tell me you don't have money, I will believe you. But when right in my presence, you now spend so much money doing other things that you consider more important than my request, then I have a problem with believing you. And I think that is where we are. Federal government is spending a lot of money on so many other things, which they consider a lot more important than education. And that is why the university system entirely, people forget that it's not just ASUU that is on strike. All the unions in the university system are on strike. And that is why the entire university ecosystem is struggling to believe government when they say they don't have money to fund university education in particular and education in general.
Ms. Ashifon, so what's your take? What's the stance of your association now to this lingering impasse?
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you for bringing me on this show. I just want to say, when we listening and we heard what the Minister of Labor from State, Keyamo, what he said, 99.9 Nigerian students were not happy because we don't just believe that the government or anybody can say that the government does not have money to meet the demand of our lecturers. Look at it, we're in this same country where Accountant General has embezzled over 80-something billion naira. The same week, the DG there's another DG who also embezzled over 40-70 billion naira, NDDC to be precise. And yet, they are keep telling us that there is no money. The way government is being run, the way the executive are, are lavishing money, it will be hard for a lecturer. It will be hard for us as a student to believe there is no money in this country. When we heard that the Keyamo said our parents need to beg ASUU, then we ask a question. Beg ASUU on what? What is really even happening? The president, who is the father of all, gave the Minister of Education 2 weeks, living without short period of time, because I'm sure before a president can give 2 weeks ultimatum for a minister under him, that shows the president is ready to make everything available for that minister to end the crisis. It's quite unfortunate that while we have been watching as a Nigerian student, that 2 weeks we did not have well Minister of Education and ASUU member where they meet. I don't know. You are also here. I'm sure you don't even hear about if they meet for that 2 weeks. And I told some of my colleagues, I'm not sure if that 2 weeks will work because of what is happening in the ministry. And I also understand again, as a Nigerian student, this strike has affected us so much. We have been affected, and the effect of this strike on us is numerous. As I speak to you today, just last week, a student who, if not because of a strike in Lautech, in Ogbomoso, will be on campus. But when this strike was on, he felt as a lady, instead of her, to join a bad gang. He said he went to an hotel. He was working there. He was kidnapped and he was killed. Had even our university were open, this wouldn't have happened to this young lady who, I'm sure, he will have been a governor of the state or a minister tomorrow, who will also contribute to the economy of this country. So the effect of this strike to us and the Nigerian students, we don't understand when the government is saying they don't have money. Then they should be to come out and let us, as a Nigerian student, to understand the reason why they are saying this. Now, I also want to appreciate the Vice Chancellor, who are also appealing to the government to see reason on how to meet the demand of ASUU, because at this crucial time, we have overstayed at home, and as such, we are not happy. We have lost a lot of things as a Nigerian student. So we are calling on the government. We are calling on the government. And I know one of the principal responsibility of a government is security and education. And as such, I think these should not be what the government should pay us back as a Nigerian student.
All right. Thank you, NANS President. Let me go to Professor Chefu here. There has been much talk about the issue of funding for education, and we have talked about this so many times that in many climes around the world, we've seen where universities and institutions source for funds, even outside the subvention and funding from government. What are universities in Nigeria doing, especially the public universities, to attract funding for some of the programs that they originally would have leaned on government perpetually for?
Now, there are two sets of public universities, those that are owned by federal government and those that are owned by state governments. For the ones that are owned by the federal government, about 48 of them, the funding is largely dependent on government subsidies. The government provides the salaries for the lecturers, for the administrative support staff, for overheads, for capital development, and the likes of it. The government also uses intervention agencies like TED Fund to also support for capital projects, for training of lecturers, for conferences, seminars, and provision of books. And then other government agencies like the Universal Communication Trust Fund, NCC, all of those ones also support institutions through their various intervention agencies. Now, the parents, on the other hand, also make their own contribution, which comes via the daily sustenance allowance of the students when they are on campus, which, if the semester is run properly, comes up to 210 days. They also have to look for money to buy their data, look for money for transportation and things like that. Now, in the federal universities, students do not pay tuition fees. And this has been on ground in the last 40 years. So a substantial cost is borne by federal government. So when you do the cost sharing between the parent and government in federal universities, it's like about 95% for the government and 5% for the parents. If you come to state universities, many state universities, students pay tuition fee, and the cost sharing ratio is slightly different for the state universities. The costs are much higher in terms of the contribution by the parents than the government of those states. Now, I agree with you that universities all over the world, in addition to tuition, which on a comparative average globally comes to like about 35, maximum 40% for most of the countries in the world, that chunk is the chunk that is missing as far as the federal-owned universities in Nigeria are concerned. In the state-owned universities, they charge probably like about 20% of that fee, whereas in the private universities, it's a lot higher. So when you look at it, the universities do not get, even from the federal government, the quantum of funds that is required to run those universities optimally. Ditto for the state governments. So the universities have in the past 40 years been on this charge to look for alternative forces to complement what government is providing. And when you add all those costs together, if you aggregate all those costs together, it's usually not enough. And if you look at the laws establishing the federal universities, there are certain inhibitions that even makes it difficult for them to go and raise funds. So we have been saying that from a governance perspective, from where the funding imperative comes to play, government needs to make up its mind what it wants to do with the universities that it owns. Many state governments are not funding their universities adequately. If not had for TED fund, many state universities will not be able to run one university, talk less of 2 or 3 that some states already have. And you remember, TED fund came from an initiative that was put together by the thinking of the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian universities. So we have a situation whereby the governance structure of our universities, the laws establishing our universities, are so archaic. And we have had this recurrent issue of funding, like you rightly mentioned, in the past 40 years that we've been going back and forth. So we need to really agree going forward, how do we want to structure the governance mechanisms that enables the universities to generate the type of funding to be able to provide the type of resources that they want. When federal government says it doesn't have money and the universities don't believe them, it's because in that same time, you don't have money and you are establishing new universities driven by all manner of political pressures. So we really need to go back to the drawing board to say, okay, how do we rejig our governance imperative to create the type of environment that we will get to make the universities get the type of funding that they require, and put the universities in a pedestal whereby if you have an admission to go into the university, funding of your education will not deter you from attending a public university. That is the type of mechanism that we need to start thinking of critically to put in place. Otherwise, this strike is called off. Another 2 or 3 years, we are back again because the funding will no longer be adequate, given the type of inflationary pressures that amount in the environment. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos was telling us yesterday that last year he spent 1.4 billion naira on electricity bills for University of Lagos alone. The contribution which government made as far as those overheads are concerned came to like about 150 million. So he has to raise the balance of that money to pay for electricity. Same type of thing in the big first generation 5 universities. their utility bills far outstrip what comes into the from the coffers of government. So there's a funding mismatch critically when you look at it between what government is putting on the table and what the universities can generate. And there are elements in the law establishing those universities that does not allow them to even do the type of things that they need to generate funding to support to meet up the funding gap that currently exists.
All right, we'll talk more about funding and other topical issues at this time. Prof. Ochefo and Sunday Ashefo will continue this conversation after this quick break. Please stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. We've been speaking with the Secretary General of the Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities, Professor Yakubu Aboki Ochefo. Also, the President, National Association of Nigerian Students, Sunday Ashefo, has also been with us. And then we are set to bring up some more questions for them.
Prof, you made very significant contributions before we went on break in terms of those strictures that you said that have not freed the universities to go out and make money for the universities and so on. Can you tell us what those things are? And are they crucial part of these negotiations? Because we've not heard ASUU really speak about how they want to free themselves from government stranglehold. They're always talking about government bring money, not government free us to go out there and make money. As you have said, that there have been universities around the world do a lot of work within the corporate world and societies to do that. When I was teaching in the universities, students get a student can get up to 20 scholarships 1 year in order to get by in school and not relying on anything. And this is because of the buying of it. Is there any way that you can really address these issues that I've just raised?
Yeah, you see, we have to go back to the fundamentals whenever we want to solve a structural problem. And what we have been doing in the last 40 years is that we've been patching up these problems here and there. If the crux of the matter is university autonomy. On the one hand, the laws establishing the universities talk about autonomy. On the other hand, the autonomy stands on one leg because the funding of the university, almost in its entirety, comes from the public sector, comes from government, directly and indirectly. And so the governing council of the universities, the chairman of the governing council and the members of the external members of the governing council are appointed by federal government for the federal universities. So we have a situation whereby, on the one hand, you say the universities are autonomous, they can go and do several things. On the other hand, that autonomy is restricted to their ability, the way they recruit their staff, the way they pay their staff, the way they who sets the wages of this staff, you know, and then of course the role also played by the regulator of the university system, which is the Nigerian Universities Commission. And so you have a situation whereby universities don't have the latitude, even though it's usually rhetoric in their presentation, but they really don't have the latitude to go out there and do the type of thing that they should be doing to raise money. That is one. Two, the philosophy of university education. Have we thought about it very carefully in the last 40 to 50 years? University education as a driver of knowledge in the fourth industrial revolution has become a different ballgame entirely, and you cannot treat it the way we treated university education 40 years ago. The type of courses that we teach, the type of curriculum that we run, the type of operating environment that we do, the type of research that we do has also changed over time. So you see universities in other parts of the world that are research universities. They focus on research. There are universities that are focusing on teaching and learning. There are universities that are focused on community engagement. But here, other than have specialized universities in terms of agriculture, in terms of science and technology, and then the conventional universities, the strategic focus of those universities have probably not been defined. And then the vice chancellor, who is the chief executive of the university, is saddled with responsibilities that shouldn't really be his own concern. You know, I just mentioned University of Lagos, where the vice chancellor has to look for money to deal with municipal services. You know, and he jokingly said that if the president of Harvard University or the vice chancellor of University of Oxford came to run University of Lagos, he'll be hard pressed because he has to deal with issues that are not in the purview of what a vice chancellor should be dealing with. We have a university system in Nigeria where we have 4 different unions operating, and a vice chancellor has to deal with 4 different unions. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. So there's the office of the vice chancellor does not even have the time and the capacity to go and focus on those proper issues that, such as the nexus between industry and the university academic engagement that will generate research funding, that will generate new ideas, that will help grow the bottom line of the university. Because he has to look for money to go and patch potholes on campus, to pay for water, to pay for NEPA, to resolve disputes between 4 different unions. We're not even talking about the student stakeholders, you know, who are the reason why the university is there in the first instance. And they are the bottom of the food chain when it comes to student support services, because all these other things are preoccupying the intellect and the energy of the administration of the university. So they really don't have the time to go and look for money to do business, to raise the type of funding that is required to meet the gap, you know, that is now in place, given the reduced funding that has been coming from federal government. In addition to all that one, they have to go and meet regularly. The federal universities have to meet regularly with about 7 different federal agencies who come for all manner of oversight functions, from the National Assembly to government agencies who come. And so every day he's on the road going to Abuja to deal with one issue or the other that he has been invited to come and do so. So where is the time? Where are the resources to do the type of thing that his counterparts in other parts of the world are doing to raise money? Ask that question. He doesn't have it.
All right. Prof, let me put you on hold and get some form of buy-in from the NANS president. Surely all these funding options would have a measurable impact on students as against, you know, leaving funding solely in the clutches of the government. What do you think?
Thank you so much. I so believe that, like I've rightly said, I've listened to my father, who is secretary of the vice chancellor, very well. And issue of funding of education in our country here in Nigeria, I believe even when most of our leaders who are seeking for political office today, when you see their manifesto, the first thing they say is they are going to give a free education, quality education. Whatever is the case, if today that the government is saying they don't have money to fund education, I said again, how do you want us to believe that government doesn't have money to fund our education? And I want to say again, as the secretary of the vice chancellor have rightly said, when you go to most of our university today, particularly in the federal university, we have federal university that students per year, per session rather, are paying over 100,000. We have federal university in this country. And yet, they want to say we are not paying. Yes, we understand that the government is not, the funding is not total from the government, because our parents are also contributing to the funding of education at their own level. At the state university, we have some state university today, the students are paying close to 250,000 naira in this country. And yet, they are still subjecting us to incessant strike every year. In 2020, we were on strike because of certain things for almost 5-6 months. In 2022 now, we are on it again. So I don't understand. If the government is not ready to fund education, like our father have said, every year you see federal government approving federal university, federal polytechnic, federal college of education, and the one that is the existing one are there without being taken care of. So we are calling on the government. The government has now opened a door for investors to come into the education sectors. You see people having private university, private polytechnics, private college of education. And as such, where some parents believe they send their children to the private university where the academic activities will not be disrupted. So we believe that if the government is being sincere, because the majority of our leaders today, majority of our governors, senators, rep members are direct beneficiaries of the free education in this country. And our country should also look outside. We should also do a comparison. We look at other countries. How are they finance their education? We have some other countries that are not up to Nigeria, who are running free education from primary to secondary, even to the tertiary. Yet, here in Nigeria, we have some states where even pupils in primary school are paying tax. And if you go back to the school, you will shed tears.
So let me just ask you briefly now, because some have even suggested that perhaps students at public universities might just have to brace up for an eventual increase or for a possible increase in school fees, which may not be as much as those in private universities are paying, but at least they will have better structures in their universities, and they will also have better teaching modules, which is part of what this ASUU strikes are all about, because you've spoken about, you've called for investment of some sort. Won't that also translate to more monies that students would have to pay? And is that also the way forward?
Well, let me say this. As it stands today, I always, when I engage with my colleagues, when we look at the analysis of what we are paying in the public university today and comparing it with those who are in even the private school, we discover that the charges that we are paying, like I have rightly said, some of us, by the time you added your acceptance fee, which we are always saying, even acceptance fee to all is a scam. You are giving me an admission, you are asking me to pay that amount to accept the admission given to me. We have some university today, the acceptance fees alone is up to 50,000. We have some polytechnic today, acceptance fees is going to 30,000. Now, calculate it with the school fees, calculate it with the charges. By the time you round it up, yes, we understand our university have to run. We understand that the management of our school, that what they are expecting from the government, the subvention given to them by the government is not enough. So if you calculate what we are paying, as it stands today, you will know it's closer, very, very closer to what those in private university are paying. And look at the time being wasted by Nigerian students who are in public universities, who are public school. Then you will know the time being wasted, the money, the charges. You know, most of the hostels around our schools today are all people who are also in the same community, the same university community. Are you getting me? Who are owned by the leaders who are representing us. You have a lot of them who maybe peradventure they have worked in the university environment. By the time they get to they are opportunity to get a political position, they come back to the university environment to come and build a gigantic hostel. And if you get to those hostels, you'll be surprised what we are paying for it. At the end of
All
the
right,
day,
Sunday.
as I speak to you today, government cannot even say they want to increase school fees. The Nigerian students we are going to sure, that will be a total shutdown.
All right, Sunday.
Increase school fees, we won't take that.
All right, Sunday. Standing on that, before we go back to Professor Chefu, the point there is, Nance, what are you doing to mobilize your members to put pressure on government on one hand or ASUU on the other hand to ensure that they come back and all of your students are back? Because the point there is, they say when two elephants fight, the grasses suffer. And in this case, I believe the students are the grasses in this metaphor. What are you doing practically in that regard?
Thank you so much. When this strike began since February 14th, we have been on it. We have embarked on the 3C Alucha that we believe consultation, consolidation, and confrontation. We have consulted, we have consolidated, and we have confronted, and yet we are still on it as I speak to you. And I want to tell you, you have seen a lot of protests across all the 36 states in this country on this issue of ASUU strike. You have even seen, let me use this opportunity to commend our parents, the NLC, who came out just 2 weeks ago, or last week rather, to also show their solidarity and support on this issue of ASUU strike. Are you getting me? We have met series of stakeholders who we believe are critical stakeholders on this matter. And yet, we are not relenting because we believe this struggle we have to win it. The strike must be called off. If not, we are not happy at all. So as a leader of Nigerian students, as I speak to you today, when I heard the comment of Koyamo, we have communicated to the Minister of Labor, which is the senior minister, and I can assure you today, by God's grace, we will be meeting with the minister. I communicated with him, and he asked us to come, so that because we want to really know what is happening. And if with what the NLC and what we have done so far on putting pressure on the government, and government seems not understanding the language, yes, we will keep mobilizing our member, occupying the streets. If that's the only thing that the government wants from us, if that is what government wants from us, but we believe with what our Nigerian students as a back on, as a protest, and as a consultation, meeting leaders, meeting several leaders, governors, senate leaders, and so on and so forth. And yet, the government did not see reason why they should come together and find a solution to this matter. Then we'll also find another strategy to show the government that enough is enough on this issue of ASUU strike. That there is need for us, there is need for our university to be open, and there is need for us to go back to our campus.
Oh yes, I want to ask Professor Chefu, the point that he made, that is the Nance President Sunday, about students being charged school fees by the back door, taking acceptance fees that are almost comparable to those of private schools. And the private schools are running themselves based on that. Is there some kind of financial responsibility required of the universities that we are not hearing of or nobody is talking about? Because if you take such amount of money from the students, they should amount to something in running the schools.
What the Nance president is referring to is what we call user charges. And these are charges that are part of the cost-sharing ratio that we've put in place in order to meet their funding gap that exists. For example, officially, the bed space in the hostels for the students remains 300 naira officially. That is what the federal government circular says. And that has been in there for nearly 40 years. When you look at the inflationary trends over that time and space, that is actually a joke. And these hostels need to be maintained. Water has to be provided in their toilets. Window blinds, window nets have to be put in place. Doors have to be repaired. The turnaround costs in terms of maintenance for the university system that is populated by a lot of students is extremely high. So the charges that we're talking about are user charges for library support, for ID cards, for medical support, those things that we require to keep the students on campus for 210 days in a year. And in the public universities, they don't come close at all to what is being paid in the private universities. In some of the state universities, yes, because in addition to those user charges, in fact, they don't have user charges in most of the public state-owned universities. They actually have fees because you have to pay tuition, you have to pay for accommodation, you have to pay for all those things you pay for them. Now, you see, the question that we need to ask, how much does it cost federal government to train one student in the Faculty of Arts, on the Faculty of Science, or in the medical school? The critical costing has been done, and the figures we have as at 2020 is a range of between 2 million to 3 million, depending on the degree program. In the arts, in the humanities, in the social sciences, it's about 2 million. As you move to the sciences and to medicine and technology, it goes up to 3 million. That is what it costs federal government to train. Now, does federal government say, okay, this is what it costs me to train one student who is studying engineering in one level, say 2 million for purposes of this conversation. In 4 years, I will need to spend 8 million on that student. Is federal government able to write a check of 8 million and send to the university times the number of students that he has gotten admission in that university? If federal government is able to do that, and the universities are not able to provide the type of environment for the students to study, for staff to be hired, for facilities to be put in place, then we'll come back and say the administration of those universities are not working. But where the cost sharing ratio on part of government, of that 2 million, government is not even able to pay 40% of that amount, then you now see where some of the funding gaps come from. So we really need to go down and distill these issues so that we solve this problem once and for all. That's why I stated at the onset of this interview that at times we like to deal with peripheral issues. When we have structural problems, we need to go to its foundations. This thing, Prof. Supporting the university system, the funding university system has been a challenge for the past 40 years, and we still haven't gotten it right, And every time we go back and forth on this matter, and it comes back to haunt us. The tragedy, the disaster that we're sitting on, that a university system is shut down for this length of time in a 2-year window, I mean, it's tragic. We now have a situation whereby some universities have 3 backlog of fresh students. They were trying to process the first set of students from the COVID issue. Then the second set of students came in, and now a third set of students have come in. Universities are at a loss what to do with them. So it's a disaster that we're found ourselves in.
All right, Prof, we'll leave it at this point now. We thank you very much for your contributions. We've run out of time, though. There were some other issues that we would have loved to bring up there, but perhaps another time we will get another moment for these issues to be addressed. Thanking you very much as well, President, National Association of Nigerian Students, Sunday Ashifon, as well as the Secretary General of the Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities, Professor Yakubu Ochefu. We thank you very much indeed for speaking with us on TVC Breakfast.